So I originally was working on a video essay for Zack Snyder's Justice League and was in the middle of editing when I got an early screener to see Superman. Superman was a film that I enjoyed upon first viewing, and rewatching it, I enjoyed it even more. I'm also glad to see that the film is doing well both critically and audience-wise. Then I had a thought for a video that I think is actually far more interesting than a discussion of a well-received film within the DCEU. The DCEU was unsuccessful, and many had rejected DC movies after the first 3 in the lineup, which is sad considering before the DCEU, DC was seen in a positive light for their movies. So the question is, what happened and what went wrong? Let's go all the way back to the days where the Dark Knight trilogy was the gold standard for superhero movies and the MCU was still within its infancy. The Dark Knight Rises was the conclusion to an amazing trilogy, and the next step in direction that Warner Brothers wanted to go in was revamping the Superman franchise. Christopher Nolan was attached to the project, as well as David Goyer writing the script. However, Nolan was not interested in directing another superhero film, and Zack Snyder was chosen as director. This was because of his unique visual style, and also he wanted to highlight the elements of the character that was a big problem in Superman Returns and what it suffered from: a lack of action. Man of Steel was released and had many mixed reactions to the film. Many praised the film for its bold visual direction and take on the Superman origin, as well as telling the unique story of how would the world react if Superman actually existed. However, many criticisms were with Snyder's direction for a darker tone as well as a less hopeful interpretation of the character. This would pale in comparison to the most controversial scene in the movie, where Superman actively kills General Zod, a decision that never bothered me at the time, but general audiences and die-hard comic book fans did not accept. The film was successful enough where Warner would greenlight a sequel, and due to the immense takeoff of the MCU, they wanted to fast-track their way to a Justice League film. The next film was to introduce Batman into their newly established DCEU. This, as well as a multitude of other characters and storylines, leading to the creation of Batman vs. Superman, which was twice as polarizing to audiences than Man of Steel. The hype surrounding the movie was entirely justified. I mean, it's Batman and Superman, arguably the two most popular characters in the world, and didn't even crack $1 billion in the box office. The positives of the movie were Ben Affleck's Batman, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, the visuals, the action, the music, and many great sequences throughout. However, there were a lot of things that people didn't quite agree with. Setting up the DCEU with overstuffing the movie with unneeded subplots and sloppy writing was a clear race to catch up with Marvel. Ben Affleck's Batman was awesome, but setting him up with years of history and nearing the end of his career at the start of a DC universe was a mistake. Jesse Eisenberg killing off Superman in his second movie before he even truly becomes Superman, the symbol of hope, was a baffling decision and completely unearned. The film had not made the numbers they wanted, and the criticism was enough to make Warner change direction in their DC universe. Suicide Squad was re-edited to try and appeal to broader audiences and also received negative reactions upon release. But one can wonder, if it wasn't changed drastically, how much would have really been well received by audiences? I mean, Jared Leto as Joker and having damage on his forehead was definitely a choice. Amidst this, Zack Snyder was directing the Justice League films and planned for it to be released in 2 parts. The standalone films for other characters were to be released after the film's releases, clearly showing the rushed nature of the universe. Tragically, Zack Snyder had to step away from the project due to tragedy in his family. Warner Brothers would capitalize on this moment and bring in Joss Whedon to rewrite and reshoot quite a bit of the film, injecting more humor and a brighter aesthetic to the film, resulting in a Frankenstein film that bombed in the box office. DC would continue to change direction and many solo films would be cancelled. Ben Affleck's solo Batman film never came to fruition, and other films were given a green light instead, such as Shazam and many other films. The studio would focus on more solo films that were well received, and Aquaman of all films would be the one to hit $1 billion in the box office. Not everything, however, was a hit. Birds of Prey was divisive, Wonder Woman 2 was a train wreck, and Black Adam may have been a dumb fun movie, but ultimately tried to go in opposite directions than what the studio wanted. Dwayne Johnson clearly trying to overstep where he needed to be. Other films outside the DCEU were financially successful as well as critically acclaimed, such as The Batman or Joker. So Warner came to the decision that they have to have a coherent universe and they needed a Kevin Feige of their own. Enter James Gunn, a director with many superhero films that resonated with audiences under his belt and a big comic book nerd himself. With the release of Superman in theaters and being accepted well by many audience members, the future is looking bright for the DCU and was established far more naturally than what came before. There's finally a set vision and a goal. With this goal, we can actually have something to look forward to in the future of the DC universe.